Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1003 for May 7th, 2023. Coming up in a few minutes.
And basically, I'm not using the word moratorium. I'm putting the word pause in there. And I did that to appease all parties just because in some people's mindset, the word moratorium sounds like a dirty word, about like the word indictment. When somebody gets indicted, they think they're guilty.
Whatever you want to call it, the bourbon capital of the world is putting the brakes on new bourbon-related developments. Nelson County's fiscal court met in Bardstown, Kentucky Thursday night and reintroduced a proposal for a 90-day moratorium on new planning approvals for whiskey-related projects in agricultural zones. I'll talk with Nelson County Judge Executive Tim Hutchins later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. He says he's not a critic of the bourbon industry, but wants more public input on where new whiskey warehouses and other projects are located. We'll also talk about the impact of losing millions of dollars in tax revenue from the repeal of the barrel tax by state lawmakers earlier this year. That's just ahead, along with the What I'm Tasting This Week department, our community segment, Behind the Label, and more. It's all coming up on this week's WhiskyCast.
Hey friends, Gabriel Cardarella here again with Dewar's Scotch Whiskey, and I have to say, Dewar's French Cask Smooth is a double-aged masterpiece, finished in apple brandy cask from Normandy to be unlike anything you've tried before. More in a bit.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast, Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's get started with the news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Another transition in the executive suite this week as Sazerac CEO Mark Brown announced his plans to step aside on July 1st. He'll become the privately held company's executive chairman. Chief Commercial Officer Jake Wentz will take over as CEO in what the company described as an 8-year-long succession plan. Scotland's Parliament has passed new legal reforms that make it possible for whiskey makers to borrow money using their stockpiles of maturing whiskey as collateral. The move is designed to make it easier for businesses to borrow money against so-called movable assets such as machinery and intellectual property. Public Finance Minister Tom Arthur said in a statement that the reforms should lead to lower interest rates for bank financing, since lenders will be able to secure their investments against those movable assets. Meanwhile, you might have heard something about a coronation in England this weekend, as King Charles was officially crowned in a ceremony Saturday at Westminster Abbey. Diageo and the royal family's Balmoral Castle and Estate released a special Balmoral Coronation Edition single malt scotch from the nearby Royal Lochnagar distillery. The first 900 bottles sold out almost completely within a day online, while the remaining 100 bottles went on sale at the castle's gift shop Saturday as part of the Coronation Day celebrations. Other coronation-themed special editions out there for collectors. London's Bimber Distillery created its first-ever blend of different cask types for its coronation release. They blended ex-bourbon matured Bimber single malt with whiskey matured in red wine casks from Bordeaux. It's available from the distillery's website for £85 a bottle. Bladnoch Distillery has released a single cask bottling from a Tokai wine cask dubbed the King's Cask. It celebrates the King's visit in 2019 to reopen the restored distillery and is available through the Bladnoch website and whiskey specialist shops in the UK for £180 a bottle. Duncan Taylor & Company is marking the King's long association with Laphroaig Distillery with a trilogy of Laphroaig single cask whiskies. The 18, 23, and 26-year-old limited edition release is available for pre-orders from the Spirits Embassy website with a price tag for all 3 bottles of £3,900 each. Finally, Hunter Lang & Company also bottled a Laphroaig to mark the coronation. It's a 32-year-old single cask filled in 1990 that is available for around £1,100 a bottle. Moving on now, Metallica's music could be described as cask strength, and now there's a cask strength edition of the band's blackened American whiskey available in the U.S. and Canada. As with the standard blackened release, the whiskey was blasted with a Metallica playlist through the black noise sonic enhancement process designed by the late Dave Pickerel and engineers at Meyer Sound. It's available with a recommended retail price of $69.99 a bottle. On a similar note, country music star Eric Church is one of the partners in the new Whiskey Gypsy brand, and that's spelled JYPSI. They teamed up with master distiller and blender Ari Sussman to create the whiskey, sourcing individual components from various distilleries, then blending those whiskeys together to create the final product. Legacy Batch 1 is available through ReserveBar.com and select retailers in Tennessee for $200 a bottle. Last year, we had actors Paul Wesley and Ian Somerhalder on to talk about their Brothers Bond bourbon. Now they've added a rye whiskey to the lineup. The American blended rye is made up of 4 different mash bills blended together. There's no word on pricing. And speaking of rye, Old Potrero is out with 3 new single-barrel ryes, a 100% straight rye, along with sherry and port cask finishes. They're all priced at $89.99 each and will be available at retailers in 8 U.S. states and through ReserveBar.com. Finally, on the American single malt front, we're still waiting for the TTB to release its final ruling on the definition of American single malt whiskey, but Santa Fe Spirits is out with its first-ever unsmoked Kilkeegan single malt. Founder Colin Keegan usually smokes his malt with mesquite wood, but made an unsmoked batch 4 years ago and laid it down in a combination of virgin American oak and ex-bourbon barrels. It's available through the distillery's website for $69.99 a bottle. You can keep up on the latest whiskey news all week long at whiskycast.com. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
If you haven't downloaded the new WhiskyCast community app yet, I hope you'll take a minute this week to download it from the Apple or Google app stores. It's a free social networking platform just for whiskey lovers, and we already have members from all over the world. Please join our online conversation about the whiskeys we all love. Time now for our events segment, looking at upcoming whiskey events going on around the world. It's brought to you by Writer's Tears. Whiskey Fest Chicago is coming up this Thursday night, and the London Whiskey Weekender gets underway on Thursday and runs through the weekend at the Kia Oval in London. Whiskey Live Dublin takes place on May 19th and 20th, and the 20th brings us the Whiskey Show in Sydney, Australia, and Distill America in Madison, Wisconsin. The Campbellton Malts Festival runs from the 23rd through the 26th in Campbellton, Scotland, ahead of the Isla Festival of Malt and Music that kicks off on the 26th and runs through June 4th. There's another Fagile on the calendar, but this one is the Isla Whiskey Festival in Melbourne, Australia on June 3rd, and the Edinburgh Whiskey Festival is June 10th in Edinburgh, Scotland. If you're organizing a whiskey event, please let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendar at whiskycast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app. The event rundown is brought to you by Writer's Tears.
Writer's Tears Copper Pot, an 18th century style of premium Irish whiskey, blended from single pot still and single malt. Like yourself, it's one of life's treasured rarities, and what's rare is wonderful. Writer's Tears Copper Pot.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. 2 homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Mortlock and the Classic Malts lineup. Kentucky is the home of the bourbon boom, with nearly $1 billion in ongoing or planned construction projects over the next decade. That unfettered growth is starting to worry local officials, especially since state lawmakers approved a bill to gradually phase out the barrel tax that provides revenue for local and county governments. Nelson County is home to Bardstown, the bourbon capital of the world, and there's been a controversy brewing over distillery expansions and warehouse construction in recent weeks. The county's fiscal court, think of it as a board of supervisors or county council, introduced a plan Thursday night to impose a 90-day moratorium on new whiskey-related projects in agricultural areas. County officials want the pause to allow for a review of all current ordinances covering bourbon-related development, with an eye to allowing more public input into those projects. While the timing of the moratorium dovetails with local concerns over lost barrel tax revenue, Nelson County Judge Executive Tim Hutchins told me there is no link between the two, at least in his county.
Well, it's a pause in the bourbon warehouses being able to locate in the agricultural districts, which means basically we're not shutting down any businesses. We're not shutting down any ongoing construction, and we're not shutting down anything city limits. It's all in what we call the ag district. So 2015, they changed the rule that allowed bourbon warehouses to locate if they had 100 acres or more in what they call the ag districts without going through planning and zoning, and no public hearings, no citizen input. I don't like that. I think if you have planning and zoning in your community, which we do, we've had it since 1974, sometimes that gets controversial, but it's here and it's there. And it helps protect the citizens and the looks and the aesthetics. And sure, it helps plan things. And when they did this thing in 2015, one of the reasons why, because at that time, bourbon warehouses had to be in an I-1 or I-2 zoning, which is heavy industrial, which is almost impossible. That's in around industrial zoning areas. So it's one of the reasons they did that. I think they went too far because they did put in a provision that allowed public input. My goal is to revise the regulations and policies. Planning and zoning, I asked the Planning and Zoning Commission to do that. That would set up another, called another set of guidelines or another zone. Plan unit development is probably one that would fit. It's PUD. They could go in and still do what they're doing, but it would have citizen input, public hearings, and the final vote will come through the elected officials to allow these warehouses and where they're going to be located at in the future. And so I met with the bourbon people last week and city representatives, county representatives, economic representatives, told them what my agenda was and my goal, and everybody together, and everybody agreed to do that. Even the bourbon people agreed to do that. And once they understood that we're not trying to hurt them or shut them down, we just want equal representation in the community. So we had one of the representatives, actually Mike Shapiro from Heaven Hill, which is the owner. It's a big distillery, and he even congratulated us after the meeting and made a little talk and thanked us for pulling everybody together so we can move forward. That was the first reading, and then we'll have to have a second reading. And then I've got the Planning and Zoning Commission already started the process because we have to have public hearings, and then we got to have public input about the changes of the ordinances in the zoning side of it that will come before the legislative bodies, and then we'll have the final vote to adopt these new policies.
So is the moratorium in place right now, or is it still have to go through a second reading?
So they'll do a second reading.
And when is that set for?
It's probably about, let me see, I don't think next week. It'll probably be, we may have to wait a 2 week. It'll be within 2 weeks. I don't want to tell you something wrong because I don't know if I have to officially wait 2 weeks for some laws. But it'll be 2 weeks or less. And and I don't foresee any opposition and everything. So, and basically, I'm not using the word moratorium. I'm putting the word pause in there, and I did that to appease all parties, just because, in some people's mindset, the word moratorium sounds like I guess, a dirty word, about like the word indictment. When somebody gets indicted, they think they're guilty. So we try to clean up the language where it sounds more appealing to everybody involved, and I think that helped quite a bit.
How did you feel after that first go-round when people were coming at you claiming that you were anti-bourbon industry?
It made me feel even stronger. I've been in this community all my life, born and raised, and I can take constructive criticism. It doesn't bother me either way because I'm trying to do the right thing. That was those people that were coming after me were the industry representatives only. I feel very confident to say we got about 95% public support from the general public in this thing. And there's been a lot of talk, a lot of Facebook posts, a lot of discussion, a lot of letters about supporting me in the fiscal court by doing this proposal. So it didn't bother me at all. I mean, I think, I just, my goal is to get it out in the public and have public input, be transparent. I didn't hide it from the bourbon people at all. I told them straight up front what I was attempting to do, and I got them at the meeting and tried to explain why, and they came on board. So I think it's important when you have these meetings to be transparent, and that's what I said when I ran for election last year. And again, I haven't talked to you, I don't think, but all these local reporters and so on, I've told them when I campaigned last year, that was part of my campaign promise, is to revise, revisit, clean up, eliminate, add not only zoning regulations, every single policy that we've got in this county. And I've actually started that process, set up committees and started that before this even came to light. So it's not like I'm attacking the bourbon industry. I've already said I was going to clean up the zoning and make it simple and easier for everybody and fair. So this is just one piece of that puzzle. So it doesn't bother me. I mean, I feel, I got a lot of support in my campaign. I won by a big margin. And, when you run on a campaign and my belief is if you win, you need to push your agenda. Because, I campaign on my agenda, and I'm going to push my agenda. And, there's some changes going to be made in this county. And we've already started, and I've actually started a bunch of it and continue to move forward.
Give me your sense of what an ideal regulations for the bourbon warehouses would look like when this process is complete.
I think when it all comes to light, it'd be what we call a plan unit development. And as an example, if you buy 100-acre rural, will still probably stay in place. But if you buy 100 acres, we'll make sure they're not in and around subdivisions. They're not in and around already existing property owners that could lose some value of their properties by a bunch of warehouses going around them. We'll make sure that the roads are adequate. We'll make sure if they go on county roads, state roads are built to a lot of higher standards because they already have the heavy truck traffic on state roads. County roads are not built that way because of the cost to build them. And we want to make sure on the county roads and city streets that these warehouses and these trucks and construction and concrete trucks and so on that's using these roads, because it wouldn't take a whole lot to tear up and destroy some public county roads, and the taxpayers would have to come back and pay that bill. So we want to make sure we got that in place. They have to have water for sprinkler systems. We want to make sure that, even though that would be a private deal, we just want to make sure that doesn't put an effect or put any burden on the people that live there now as far as pressure and the volume of water. That's just some examples. Some buffers, possibly some more tree lines and buffer zones, so you wouldn't be able to, for the abuse shed would be, more feasible. So there's a lot of things in the PUD side of it that we can make sure that's in place, and I think there's room for that.
What about the comments that were made a couple of weeks ago that said that this was a reaction to the barrel tax being repealed?
Well, that's if that's their opinion, that's fine. I'm doing it. I'm going to stick to my guns. If you want to get back to the barrel tax side of it.
Let's get back to that. What is it going to have as an impact on Nelson County when you lose the barrel tax?
Well, it's going to be several millions of dollars over time. But what I'm doing in this county and other counties is going to be that when it comes to that side of it, we're going to have to come up and we're going to attempt to work with the bourbon people to come up with some more policies to help support our ambulances and dispatch centers and firefighters, and it's a discussion for another time. And I feel like if we keep this open dialogue and work with them and try to help them on these warehouses and work together, that they'll come to the table with some revenue that would help our county and other counties. And that's my goal. Now, unlike, not to be critical, but unlike the bourbon representatives and the Kentucky Distilleries Association and the legislatures in the House and the Senate, none of them reached out to me when that House Bill 5 was proposed and written and pushed through Frankfurt. So unlike them, I reached an olive branch across the table and invited them to come to the table with me and come up with some compromises on the subjects that I've just discussed. So I feel like I went above and beyond and what the way I was treated, and our surrounding counties were treated, and our elected officials were treated. And I just feel like that. I didn't hold a grudge, unlike what they're trying to say, being vindictive. If that's the case, I would not have started that dialogue with the discussions with all the parties involved. So, that's coming from them. That's fine. They can say what they want.
Does the loss of the barrel tax make it less likely that we're going to see any more development as far as the counties are concerned within the bourbon industry?
I believe that with the barrel tax going away, there's another piece of that, which is industrial revenue bonds. The previous administration passed many of them that gave the bourbon industry tremendous amount of tax breaks on the property taxes. When I came in, I campaigned on that also, and I've only done one. Instead of a 30-year bond, we did a 15-year bond. And I already said that during my campaign. I committed to that, and I'm pretty doubtful. Not only doubtful, you're not going to see the things that they did in the past with my administration and the fiscal court, that magistrates that sit on the court. We'll continue to work with them, but I think you'll see some revenue streams coming back to the court when we get done in our discussion to help out these, especially the emergency services. It's up to the private sector what they can do and can't do. I think it's going to be a challenge for them to, in these communities where they want to put these without that barrel tax. Now, the property tax side of it, depends on what the property tax side. I'm a pro-growth, pro-business, less tax judge, and my mentality's always been that way. But I always say you still got to be fair and balanced. And I'm not a fan of any industry or anybody taking the revenue from our local people that's going to put a burden on our local citizens.
What does the barrel tax fund now in Nelson County?
Oh, it's over $8.6 million, I think. And then you get the school districts, city schools, county schools, EMS, dispatch, our general fund coming in the Nelson County Fiscal Court's general fund, $1.2 million in the budget we're setting in. Next year we're projecting about $1.6 million. The year after that, probably closer to $2 million, and we're going to see some growth because we have new warehouses and we still have a lot of growth in our county. So about probably about 7 years or so, we'll still see an increase, even though the rates continues to go down just because we have that growth. But after about, let's say, 7 or 8 years, you'll see the revenue start going down, and then in 20 years it goes to zero. So, as the leader of the county, thinking about the future generations and our kids and grandkids, I'm trying to, lead this fiscal court. Actually, in the budget, I'm showing some savings that we're going to try to set up a fund while we have this growth. And I'm going to offset that with some savings account that we can put in investments that we can project to save money when this thing goes to zero. That we'll have a so-called nest egg that it won't impact our future generations as much. And that's what I'm attempting to do.
Are you talking with your colleagues in the other neighboring counties like Judge Summers over in Bullitt County and Judge Doherty in Marion County about how best to resolve this issue and how best to work around it?
I've been in several conversations with both judges. They're working on some provisions in their counties also. There's different mechanisms in each county as far as what we can and can't do. Marion County, for example, does not have planning and zoning countywide. It limits them on what they can do and can't do. Judge Doherty and I have talked several times, and he's working on some policies, and Judge Summers is also working on some policies. So, but together, I think we all are unified, and we want to make sure that we want to what's going to be best for all the surrounding counties also. But it's a big everybody's tax rates are a little different. Some counties have occupational taxes. Ours, we've got one which got a cap on it. Some counties have fire districts. Some counties have insurance taxes. So they're all structured a little different. So it's hard to put one total plan that will be good for all three counties. So we're unified in covering the policies that we can take care of our citizens.
The Nelson County Fiscal Court will take up the construction moratorium for final approval later this month. We'll keep you posted. That's WhiskyCast In-Depth, brought to you by Mortlach, whiskey's best-kept secret. Hidden away for decades in some of the world's most famous Scotch whiskies comes a single malt inspired by an original for a fortunate few. Discover the entire Mortlach lineup at malts.com. Let's start off the What I'm Tasting This Week department with a look at a vintage single-grain Scotch whiskey from 359 Spirit Purveyors, the 30-year-old Dram Hunter's Cambus Single Grain. This one started out like a lot of single-grain whiskeys do, in ex-bourbon barrels, but it was later transferred into a second-fill Oloroso sherry cask, which raised the complexity significantly. The nose has touches of toffee, dark fruits, and hints of apricots and licorice. The taste is thick and dry with toffee balanced by white pepper and hints of plums and apricots. The finish is long, dry, and aromatic. I've often said that single-grain Scotch whiskies don't get the respect they deserve, and this one deserves a lot of respect. I'm scoring the Dram Hunters Cambus 30-year-old a 93. Next up, the team at American Mash and Grain has done another mashup of American whiskeys for its Borrowed Page series. Volume 2 is a blend of American single malt from the Virginia Distilling Company, rye whiskey from Mammoth Distilling in Michigan, and single pot still whiskey from Colorado's Talnua Distillery. It's bottled at 55% ABV. The nose has touches of strawberries, dark fruits, cooked bananas, vanilla, and cocoa powder. The taste is creamy and thick with notes of peaches, vanilla, and ground peppercorns. The spices build up slowly, leading into the finish, which is long with dark chocolate, lingering spices, a nice maltiness, and a kiss of oak. I'm scoring the Borrowed Page Volume 2 from American Mash and Grain a 92. Finally, let's look at this year's Oban Distillers Edition Single Malt Scotch. It's finished in Montilla Fino Seasoned American Oak casks and bottled at 43% ABV. The nose is delicate and fruity with dried flowers, heather, peaches, red apples, and honey. The taste is creamy and sweet with a touch of brine in the background, full of peaches and red apples, along with a touch of apricot, dried flowers, and honey. The finish is long and fruity with just a hint of spice, and I'm scoring the 2023 Oban Distillers Edition a 94. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of more than 3,400 different whiskeys at the WhiskyCast website. Check it out this week.
Gabriel here again. Dewar's Master Blender Stephanie McLeod has been doing some amazing things with cask finishing lately, and Dewar's French Cask Smooth is no exception. It's the 5th addition to the Dewar's Cask Finishing Series. This 8-year whiskey is double-aged, then finished in Calvados casks to blend together the best of Scottish distilling and aging with the finest in French brandy maturation. The nose is sweet honey and citrus in perfect balance. Taste it, and you'll get this unmistakable note of baked apple, citrus, and a hint of cinnamon spice. Now, I recommend it this time of year as an apple cinnamon highball, using lemon juice, simple syrup, unfiltered apple juice, and club soda, or simply enjoy it on its own. Either way, it's a specially crafted reward for your curiosity.
Let's open up the inbox now for our community segment, featuring some of the commentary this week from the WhiskyCast community app. It's brought to you by Waterford Whiskey. Mark Murphy is a small-scale distiller, and he posted this comment on last week's interview with Ian Palmer. Here's what he had to say. I really enjoyed the podcast this week, primarily for the validation that your interviewee from the Inchdarney Distillery gave me. His reasoning for the rye and the new American oak is identical to what we are doing. I'm seriously enjoying the learning experience I am getting from this podcast. Thanks, Mark. Thank you for the comment, Mark. Scott Rogers posted this comment on a different note. A few years ago, my favorite regular expression from my favorite distiller was an $80 bottle, NAS. Today, it's more often a $120 bottle. Meanwhile, the same distillery has added a very young age statement expression that's about one-third the price. Is my favorite regular expression 3 times as good as the cheap young expression? No. It's better, but not by a factor of 3. So if both bottles are in stock, I never pick the more expensive bottle. If the young bottle is available at $45, why would I pay the extra $75 for at most $20 worth of added quality? The young whiskey isn't as excellent, but it's still quite good. And Willem Killian posted this response. I completely agree. Some whiskeys are getting priced out of my range. I'd rather look for something that hits that sweet spot where it's affordable, but still quality. And our poll of the week came from Tyrone Cote this week, who wanted to know what one looks for most in a distillery tour. 23% said unique bottlings, 20% said a warehouse visit, and just 3% said a fair price. The most popular response by a long shot, 54% said a good tour guide. It proves the guide can make or break a distillery tour. By the way, we asked the same question on Twitter just to get a comparison, and 57% said a tour guide. The remaining 43% said unique bottles, with no one saying a warehouse visit or fair pricing made a difference to them. Finally, Justin Boyer posted this comment on LinkedIn on last week's episode with Ian Palmer at Inchdarney Distillery. Excellent episode. I'm excited to see more Scotch distilleries investigate rye. Rye whiskies can be fantastic and unique, and Scotland is the only country where they've been largely ignored. I'm happy to see that change, even if the bottles may be difficult to find where I live. Thank you, Justin. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the free WhiskyCast community app for iOS and Android users, or you can look for us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whiskey, where they explore the frontiers of natural flavor one farm at a time to create unique Irish whiskies. Visit them on the web at waterfordwhiskey.com. Let's wrap up the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history and science that makes whiskey unique. Russ Charity had a question in the app following our interview last week with Ian Palmer. Ian mentioned the non-foaming malted rye and how luck played a part in avoiding the problem of foaming with rye. Does anyone know the mechanism a distillery would use to remove foam from the process? Well, once again, Inchdarney solved the problem of keeping its rye mashes from foaming during fermentation by the use of a specific strain of rye that's less prone to foaming than other strains. Foaming can also be a problem during barley fermentations as well, and distillers use a couple of different methods to keep it under control. One is by adding an anti-foaming agent to the mash that helps break down the viscosity of the liquid and keeps it from foaming. The other is a mechanical way of keeping foam checked. The fermenters are equipped with rotating paddles that break up the foam as it forms at the top of the fermenter. Russ, I hope this answers your question. If you have something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just use the contact form at whiskycast.com to get in touch with us. That's all for this edition of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and of course a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the new WhiskyCast community app. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
So, in Spain, they call Redbreast Petit Roco. It's me, but a touch more exotic. Kind of like a Redbreast PX edition. Finished in Pedro Jimenez casks, adding a velvety and decadent dimension. You know, I won't lie. A climate like this makes me wish I was a migratory bird.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Friends, it's me again, reminding you to try Dewar's French Cask Smooth Blended Scotch Whiskey. The best of two cultures and traditions in one beautiful bottle. Please drink responsibly.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2023, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.